Most people never talk about the quiet, almost invisible shift that happens when you finally have real money set aside. And yet, it's one of the most profound changes a person can experience, one that completely reshapes how you think about work, expenses, and risk. Because here's the truth. When you finally begin to accumulate wealth, life doesn't suddenly explode into luxury cars and champagne dinners. What changes first is your perspective. When you've spent most of your life without financial security, you see money as survival. Every paycheck feels like a short breath before you have to dive underwater again. You work, you earn, and before you can even enjoy it, the bills start knocking. Rent, groceries, insurance, a few dinners out, and then something unexpected. The flat tire, the broken phone, the random $40 mistake that somehow feels like the final straw. You're not irresponsible. You're just constantly operating at the edge, where one small setback feels like a disaster because there's no margin for error. That's what it feels like when money controls you instead of the other way around. Your emotions rise and fall with your balance. Your sense of stability depends on nothing going wrong. And that constant pressure makes even small expenses feel like personal failures. But then something changes, maybe slowly, almost without noticing. You start saving, investing. Not much at first, but enough to matter. Maybe you've built up $2,000, $5,000, or even $10,000 in a brokerage account. It's not life-changing yet, but it's real. It's yours. And for the first time, you realize that your money can move on its own. Imagine this. The stock market shifts by just 1% in a single day, something that happens all the time, and your balance changes by $100. A number that used to represent a night out, a bill, or half a week's groceries now moves quietly without you lifting a finger. At first, it feels strange, even unsettling, to see your net worth change without your permission. But over time, that feeling fades. You stop panicking when numbers move up or down because you start to understand something deeper. Wealth is not static. It breathes, it grows, it fluctuates. And this is the first real shift. The moment you stop seeing money as something that only comes from your labor, you start to see it as a living system, something that can grow while you sleep. It's no longer about trading hours for dollars. It's about building a foundation that keeps working quietly in the background, compounding bit by bit. This realization is small at first, almost silent, but it's powerful. Because once you feel it, you can't go back. The anxiety that once came from every expense starts to fade. You stop seeing money as fragile and start seeing it as fluid, as something that can move, adapt, and return. That's the beginning of everything. The first time you see your investments grow, even just a little, it feels like magic. You might check your portfolio and see that it's up $80, $150, maybe $300. You didn't work overtime. You didn't grind through another week at a job you hate. You simply existed, and your money grew. That single realization changes everything. Let's say you've managed to build up $10,000 in investments. It's not wealthy by any measure, but it's progress. When the market moves just 1%, your account fluctuates by $100. That's the cost of a dinner date, a utility bill, or a tank of gas, and it happens while you're asleep. At first, it can be unnerving. You might stare at the numbers wondering, did I just lose $100? But then you see it bounce back the next day. The same market that took $100 away gives it back effortlessly, and somewhere inside, you begin to relax. This is where the second shift begins. You start to detach emotionally from small fluctuations. You realize that money can move without destroying your peace, that a $100 swing isn't a crisis, it's just part of the rhythm of growth. Now imagine your portfolio grows to $100,000. That same 1% move now means a $1,000 change in a single day. With $1 million invested, it's $10,000. At that scale, your wealth can drop $10,000 before lunch and recover it by dinner. For most people, that's an entire month's income, gone and returned in 12 hours. And once you've seen that happen enough times, something profound changes in how you view money itself. Suddenly, a $100 car repair doesn't sting the same way. A $5,000 medical bill doesn't ruin your week because you've seen your net worth fluctuate by that amount or 10 times that amount in a single day. You stop reacting emotionally to financial noise, and you start thinking in systems. You start asking, what does this mean in the long run, instead of, how do I survive this right now? When you reach that stage, expenses stop feeling like enemies. They become just another number in a much larger equation, one that's constantly moving, adjusting, and growing. That perspective alone separates savers from investors and investors from the truly financially free. Because once you've experienced it, that calm that comes when your wealth moves independently, you stop fearing the next bill or setback. You start to feel secure, not because you have millions, but because you've built something that doesn't vanish the moment life throws a challenge your way. And then, something else happens. You start to see opportunities instead of problems. You stop playing defense and start playing offense. That's when money stops being a weight and starts becoming leverage. That's the real beginning of financial growth. When your portfolio reaches a meaningful size, $250,000, $500,000, or maybe even $1 million, the world starts to look different. A 1% swing in the market, which is entirely normal, now moves your net worth by thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. And that's when the third mental shift happens. You stop seeing money as something to hoard and start seeing it as something that lives in motion. At this point, a 30% market crash might take your $1 million portfolio down to $700,000. The first time it happens, your stomach drops. You stare at the screen and wonder how something so intangible can make you feel so heavy. But then, after a few weeks or months, you realize something important. Nothing in your real life has changed. The roof is still over your head. The lights are still on. You still have food in the fridge. The numbers went down, yes, but you're still here. That's when the panic fades, replaced by perspective. You begin to understand that volatility isn't the enemy. It's simply the market breathing, expanding and contracting like the tides. And you, as an investor, are learning to surf those waves instead of being dragged beneath them. You also start realizing that the real strength of your wealth isn't in how much you've saved, but in how much of it has grown without your direct effort. Let's say your portfolio is worth $500,000, but you only contributed $200,000 yourself. The rest, $300,000, came from growth, compounding, and time. That means most of your wealth wasn't built by your labor. It was built by your patience. And because of that, losses feel different. When the market dips by $10,000 or $20,000, it's not your hard-earned overtime disappearing. It's simply the market adjusting the value of profits that your money created. You didn't have to wake up early, fight traffic, or answer to a boss to earn that growth. It came from the system you built. So when it fluctuates, it doesn't sting the same way. That's the moment you realize you've crossed into a new mindset, where you no longer trade time for money. You've separated your income from your effort. The hours you work and the wealth you build no longer move in the same rhythm. And ironically, this is where the real peace begins. Because now you understand that wealth is not fragile. It bends, it stretches, it dips, but it always trends upward over time. You've learned to zoom out, to see the bigger picture that most people never do. You start thinking not in days, but in decades, not in panic, but in patience. And that's where the seeds of true financial freedom begin to take root. The strange thing about wealth is that the more you have, the calmer you become. It's not because you stop caring, but because you start understanding what really matters. You no longer obsess over daily market swings or small, unexpected costs. You realize that a $1,000 expense today won't even register a year from now. You begin to see that the true power of money lies not in control, but in perspective. Imagine this. Your portfolio dips by $10,000 one morning. Years ago, that would have ruined your week. But now you've seen it before, and you've seen it recover. You sip your coffee, check the news, and move on with your day. Because deep down, you know that wealth isn't built or destroyed in a single moment. It's shaped by the quiet consistency of time. This calm is not arrogance. It's awareness. It's the realization that the same market that drops can also rise. That the long-term trajectory always favors those who stay patient. You stop trying to predict every move, and instead focus on building systems that can survive any storm. And something amazing happens when you reach that stage. Life's little problems stop feeling so big. A $1,500 car repair? It's just another Tuesday. A $5,000 medical bill? Annoying, sure, but manageable. Even a surprise expense doesn't shake you anymore, not because you've become numb, but because you've experienced far larger fluctuations without breaking a sweat. Your emotions no longer rise and fall with your bank balance. You've detached your peace from your paychecks. That's what true control feels like, not the ability to predict every outcome, but the ability to remain unshaken when outcomes change. And it's not just about money anymore. This mindset bleeds into every area of your life. You stop rushing. You stop chasing. You stop reacting to every inconvenience as if it's a crisis. Because you know your foundation is strong, your wealth is quietly compounding, even while you sleep. That's when the obsession with saving every dollar begins to fade. You still respect money, but you no longer fear it. You realize the difference between being cheap and being strategic, between cutting costs and building assets. You're no longer afraid to spend because you know every expense has context. You can take that vacation, replace that car, fix that roof, not out of recklessness, but out of confidence. That's what people don't understand when they say money changes you. It doesn't change your personality. It changes your perspective. It replaces fear with focus, chaos with calm, and anxiety with awareness. And the day you feel that shift, that quiet peace when you know you're safe no matter what happens next, that's the day you realize you've crossed into a completely different life. At some point, everything flips. You stop chasing money and money starts chasing opportunity. You stop asking, how do I make more? And start asking, how do I make this last forever? That's the final and most profound shift. When you realize wealth isn't just about accumulation, it's about peace, patience, and power. You no longer measure success by how much you can spend. You measure it by how little you have to worry. Because true financial freedom doesn't scream. It's quiet. It's the confidence of knowing that if something breaks, you can fix it without stress. It's walking into a restaurant and ordering what you want, not what's cheapest. It's handling a $2,000 expense with the same calm as paying for groceries. At this point, you understand something most people never will. Money stops being about money. It becomes about freedom of mind. The less you're controlled by small expenses, the more clearly you can see the bigger picture, your future, your opportunities, your life as a whole. You know that a $1,000 swing in your portfolio is meaningless in the grand scheme. You've learned that wealth isn't built overnight, and it's never lost overnight either. The market goes up, it goes down, but the only thing that matters is that you stay in the game. Because that's how compounding works, quietly, relentlessly, and invisibly at first, until one day it becomes undeniable. And that's why the wealthy don't panic when markets crash. They've zoomed out far enough to see what time can do. They understand that the biggest gains are often born in the moments of greatest fear. They've built a system that grows whether they're working, resting, or traveling, because wealth, once in motion, doesn't stop. So when people say that money changes you, they're half right. It doesn't change your core. It changes your perception of control. The real flex isn't the designer car or the expensive watch. It's being so financially stable that when life throws a problem at you, you handle it calmly, quietly, and move on. Because once you've reached this stage, you realize something simple but powerful. You don't own peace of mind. You build it. And it's built through discipline, through years of consistency, through the decision to invest instead of spend, to plan instead of hope. That's when you finally understand what financial freedom really means. It's not luxury. It's stability. It's not status. It's security. It's knowing that your wealth will continue to grow quietly in the background, long after you stop thinking about it. This is the shift no one talks about, the one that turns savers into investors, workers into owners, and worry into calm. And if you've made it this far, you already know, the journey doesn't end here. It's just beginning. This is Mike Compound, reminding you that true wealth isn't about how much you can spend. It's about how little you have to worry.